everyone. I'm so excited to have another episode of Brown Girl Green. And today we are going to be talking about all things related to the intersections of plant-based diets, culture, and, using food as a medium for storytelling. And I'm really excited to have today's guest, Selassie Atadika, who is the founder of Midunu, which is an amazing culinary venture that is trying to infuse Ghanaian culture with being more plant forward. So I'm so excited to have her on the show. Of course, the show is all about not only climate solutions, but very much emphasizing the need for the raising the profile and the voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color worldwide who are part of a multitude of diasporas who are working on addressing, solutions to the climate crisis. So I love Selassie's approach to a climate solution, which is through being plant forward while also, using a lot of cultural storytelling. And, I'm just really excited to have her on the show today. So thank you so much, Selassie, for joining today on the Brown Girl Green show. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you, Christy. I'm super excited to be here.
Amazing, amazing. So, just to start us off, tell us about your journey with food. Why was this a medium that you felt passionate about to explore? And how did sustainability become infused in that journey over time?
Well, I started off, I was born in Ghana and grew up in New York. And so food was a major part of how we maintained our culture from Ghana. So, from a young age, just always eating Ghanaian dishes, but knowing that there was a difference between what we ate at home and what was being eaten out when we would go out to school or to other events. And I just became sort of obsessed with it. I always was involved with food. And later on, I ended up doing a master's in my bachelor's degree was actually in environmental studies and geography. And I ended up working for the UN, traveling around the continent, and kept seeing food as a way of connecting people. People came together for food, people exchanged with food, and I could also see food as a way of creating an economy. Food was also a way of sharing just appreciation, love, culture, and I just felt really strongly that it was something that I could contribute to, and it could really be a delicious way of creating change.
Wow, I absolutely love that. I think, as someone who is a foodie myself, I just think food is such a powerful way to be able to talk about a moment in time, whether it's history or politics or culture, in a way that really invites people in. Like, it really is the definition of, bringing a seat to the table, right?
Exactly.
It's like, what better seat at the table than sharing a meal with someone? And so I love that so much. That's great. And, I'm just wondering, what does Midunu mean? Like, what does it stand
Yeah.
for? What was behind the story of creating Midunu? Can you tell us a
Yeah.
little bit more about that?
So Midunu is in the Ewe language, which you'll find in parts of Ghana and Togo. And it means literally, it's actually a short version. The long version is Va Midunu, which means come, let's eat. And so growing up in New York, my dad, whenever he would come home, he would be the last person to arrive. And that's when the family would get together for dinner. So we'd be doing homework and different things. And then you just hear Midunu. And so it was like, it's dinner time, And so you knew it was that time to come to the table. It's something that you say whenever you're about to eat. So that's one of the things that I really feel is beautiful culturally, is that we don't eat alone. You always invite others. So it doesn't even matter if it's literally one mango or one whatever. You always, whenever you're in the presence of food and other people are around, you always invite them to eat with you. I think as the business has evolved, it's also important for me to say, we should all eat. We should all have the democracy of food. It's important for us to all be able to eat. So it came around because I was actually doing a dinner with some friends, and it was my menu, it was my theme. And so I kind of was putting together notes, and it was 3 friends. We were doing pop-ups in Senegal, and it was my dinner. I was doing the entire menu, and they said, you can put together a little menu or a note card. And so I did. And at the end, instead of saying bon appetit, because we were in Senegal and it's a Francophone country, I just was like, Va Midunu. And I really wanted it to be an invitation for them to enter into my culture, into my space. And so, fast forward 3 years later, when I was ready to start my company, it just made sense to allow to ask that as an invitation. It's an invitation to bring others to my table.
Wow, I really love that. And, as part of that invitation, you try to make it really accessible. A lot of what you emphasize a lot in your work is about being plant forward, which I love because I'm definitely in the plant forward category. I'm currently not vegan due to, my own inabilities due to intolerances and things like that. But I always try to embrace a plant forward lifestyle, which for people who don't
Yeah.
know, it just means embracing more plant based options where you can, being able to explore things like incorporating more fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, plant based proteins instead of just like strictly, animal products and things like that. It's just getting you a bit closer to, 100%, but it doesn't require 100%. It requires just like trying to find that in between. And I love that because that's where I'm at, right? I like also am very plant forward because I also feel like it brings more people into the conversation, I think, sometimes than, be 100% vegan or plant based. And like, I would
Yeah.
never preach for that because I'm not even that. And so I really like that, like, that's also kind of the ethos behind your culinary practices. So I'm just wondering,
I,
like, what
yeah.
got you on this path to embrace, this motto of being plant forward with your foods that you put out?
For me, it was kind of easy because I moved back to Ghana about 8 years ago. And in that journey, I just kind of, well, even before I came back to Ghana, it was really just studying food and how people eat. And so when you see traditional cultures, you eat mostly plant-based, except special occasions. And
Yeah.
so that's always how, like, from time immemorial, in almost every single culture in the world, it's pretty much been that way. So, meat was a special occasion. So if you see a lot of, traditional cultures, you're slaughtering the cow or the goat because it's a special occasion. And then when it's done, it's done. Right. And so for me, it was like, how
Mm-hmm.
do I respect how we used to eat? And as I was looking, I just realized that there were all these dishes with nuts and like West Africa, we use peanuts and groundnuts a lot. So there are all these soups that already have their protein in it. There's a lot of beans being used. And so I just studied our traditional dishes and I realized that the animal protein
Mm.
was really not necessary and was usually even probably very limited. And so I just kind of
Mm.
stuck to that. And for me, it's I think it reminded me of, my first time I went to India. It was amazing because I was traveling with a friend of mine who was vegetarian. And we were traveling together, and she's like, can we just kind of order mostly vegetarian so that I can eat everything? And I was like, of course. And so on that trip, it was like way beyond salad, way beyond. So, like, the food is just so delicious. And so when you look at a lot of traditional dishes in Ghana and other parts of West Africa, a lot of the traditional dishes are fundamentally vegetarian in nature. And so it wasn't a stretch for me, but I just love being able to highlight and showcase the deliciousness that comes through with vegetarian and vegan dishes as well, like anything that's plant forward. So that has been like just really nice to be able to make it delicious and have people come along with you. And I
Yeah.
think that's the thing, is like how everybody loves good food. And once you make it delicious, like, we're all down.
Nah, nah, exactly. No, I love that so much. And what are some of your like plant forward Ghanaian like recipes that you really love that like just like make you really excited, or like maybe your friends and family were like, "Whoa, how did you make it this way?"
Yeah, I think in terms of flavor, we develop flavor. So, there's so many ways to get flavor. And sometimes I actually think that it's easier to cook plant forward. Like, the flavors coming from the vegetables, from the fresh herbs, and you just build on that. And one of my
Mm.
favorite dishes is actually just a beans dish. It's like beans, it's almost like a tomato stew. Like, you stew the tomatoes, you add the beans to it. And in Ghana, we use a little bit of palm oil, and it's like done in an environmentally appropriate way. So it's how we eat, and there's just loads and loads of flavor. Traditionally, what they'll do is they'll add a little bit of either like powdered shrimp or powdered fish. So when you live in Ghana, we live at the climate where it's also known as the danger zone because it's so hot. One of my favorite dishes is this beans dish, and it's kind of like stewed tomatoes, beans, and it's a touch of well processed palm oil. And the flavors are just amazing. We normally eat it with fried plantain, and so that dish is, we call it red red. but it's just like this combination of, you've got like the sweetness from the like plantain, and you've got this like uber umami coming from the beans, and just kind of like the two things coming together. It's just like, who really need, you're not missing anything, you know. But traditionally we live in a warm climate, so it's kind of known as sort of like a danger zone if you're in the kitchen. So this is where, like, if you leave something out, it will spoil really fast. So there are all these traditional preservation techniques, whether it's salting, smoking, drying, and all ways of like making sure we don't waste the catch of the day or whatever it is that we have prepared. So when you see a lot of dishes in Ghana, you'll see smoked or dried pieces of meat or fish or something. So this beans dish, what normally happens is like there's a small piece of like smoked fish, or there's a little bit of like dried shrimp that would be added to it. So it's just that tiny little something. It's almost like a little flavor agent.
Back to what you were saying about avoiding food waste because food tends to spoil, and you were saying
Yeah.
things of that
So
nature.
you'll just,
Would you be able to
yeah,
talk a little bit more about
just in terms of looking at, I think like food and cuisines start at community. That's how we all learned. Like first it was like agriculture. So once we had agriculture, we actually were able to stay in one place, and we weren't doing hunter and gatherer stuff, you know? So you can see the beginning of cuisine starting from when we were all together in a community. And that's when you start to see like, okay, we are fishermen, we caught the fish and we don't want it to spoil. So we're going to fry some, we're going to smoke some, we're going to dry some, and we're going to ferment some. And so that's actually how all these preservation techniques started. So it's like, it's not, now it's cool and hip to do fermentation and to do this and that, but it's really just a
that?
functional thing that people have been doing from time
Yeah.
immemorial. And so, but in our food profiles in Ghana, you see that it's part of the deliciousness that we know. So like for me, for example, people say it's sweet, salty, acid, sour, and umami. I'm like, where's smoky? Smoky is like the number 6, right? Smoky is such a big part of what we do because it's part of our preservation techniques. And it's such like when you're eating food, it
Mm.
has that smoky flavor. We even have something in Ghana called, well, I don't know what's the traditional name is, but it's actually a smoked water. So when you have a ceramic pot that keeps water cold, we actually smoke pieces of the palm tree, and then it fills the crevices in the pot, and then when you fill it with water, it's infusing the water with the smoky flavor. So for me, it's like smoky is its own standalone flavor, but that's what we use for preservation techniques, and it's found its way into our food. And I just think that's another way of making food delicious. Like you can give it flavors far beyond, like I smoke my mushrooms, and then like, I'll roast them and then I'll smoke them. So there's so many layers of flavor in that mushroom that like, it's just like next level. I remember I served it on a plate at some point, and one of my friends was at the dinner, and so somebody was sitting next to him and was like, what kind of meat is this? And he was like, it's mushroom. So yeah, you can do lots of things. The other dish that I love is a dish called eto, and it is again plantains. And it's plantains that are, it's a dish actually that traditionally you get on your birthday. So like somebody in your house or your friends will make it and bring it to you for your birthday. What we do is you boil the plantain, and then you add to it peanut butter, ground-up paste, and it's eaten with avocado. It's eaten with really well caramelized onions. And so that's a dish that I love doing. What I do with my version of eto is I do it a little bit like more sushi style. So I use the avocado, I'll slice it and then actually make it into like an avocado roll, but inside is the plantains. And we finish it off with beautiful like edible flowers for different other layers
Whoa.
of flavor, some roasted peanuts for texture. We caramelize the onions and like nice long beautiful pieces, but then we dry them so that they have another layer of texture.
Oh my gosh, you're making my mouth water. I'm like, I'm so hungry listening to that. I need to try that at some point for sure. That sounds amazing. And, hearing all of that, there's a lot of people, well, I hear it all the time, even from like my other friends who know what I do for work and stuff like that, who are like, oh, like being more plant based, like you're going to lose like flavor and culture. And it's just like, this thing for people who just like are devoid of culture. Like you need this like meat and this these animal products for sure to like feel like you're actually connected to your roots. Like what
Mhm.
are your thoughts on that? Like how have you kind of redefined that? Obviously it seems like in Ghanaian culture there's already inherently some of that plant forward ethos like with
Yeah.
stuff you already have, but I
Yeah.
just want to know more, like how do you challenge some of that misconception?
Well, I mean, when I started doing my dinners here, I actually would have like a 6 or 7 course meal, and then for like maybe 2 or 3 courses, we would have a vegetarian and a non-vegetarian option. And I remember there was one time I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't remember like who ordered what, so I had the 2 plates of food, and I was like, "Oh, did you order the vegetarian one or the non-vegetarian?" And the guy was like, I would never be a vegetarian. Can't you see? Like, in Ghana, you would say like I'm a big man, which means like I'm a wealthy person. Can't you tell that I'm a wealthy person? Like, why would I want the vegetarian option? And I was like, okay, no beef, no beef. Okay, no problem. I didn't mean to insult you. And I was like, here's, but since I'm already here, here's the vegetarian option. You can try. And I left it, and then they tried it, and then they thought it was delicious. So when I came back, he was like, I'm vegetarian now. So I think for me it's like there's all these preconceived notions about what it is. So I actually don't talk about it anymore. Like I used to make a big like spiel about it, but now I'm like, I'm just not going to talk about it because people don't even realize it. They just are looking for delicious. So for me, it's actually taking away the label is one thing. Two is actually, in terms of culture, I would push back and I would say, go back into whichever cuisine you're talking about and do a deep dive into what that
Hmm.
food culture's tradition is. And most likely it is mostly plant forward with little bits of meat, and things have flipped over in the last however many decades, but like every culture has rice and beans almost, and that is the
Yeah.
perfect protein, and somehow our ancestors knew that, and like they all almost every culture has a rice and beans dish. So that's telling us already the reality. So for me, when I look back historically, particularly like with a lot of nomadic people, and you will see that nomadic people, their value is in their cattle and their like livestock, so they're not killing them every day, so they're not eating meat every day. They're using the byproducts. They're using the byproducts like the milk and the yogurts and the
Mm.
cheeses, and that's actually how they sustain their wealth. Because if your wealth was cows and you ate meat every single or beef every single day, you're losing money every single day. So actually I do believe that there have been adaptations over the years, but if you look at most cultures, it's mostly plants with a little bit of animal
Yeah.
protein, and then yes, byproducts, so yeah, if you're trying to make the transition or you're even like contemplating it, what I kind of do is I flip it. So like, what if you make the animal protein, your garnish, like your crouton, like have just change the balance, just, I'm not saying not to, especially if you're just kind of like going on that journey. So for example, I did an event in Turkey a few years ago, and they love kebab. And so what did I do? We ended up doing a blended kebab. So it was half mushroom and half beef, or lamb in that case. And what does it do? It's reduced the animal protein intake by half, right?
Oh, I love that. I mean, I think that's the key, right? Like I think sometimes people get really turned off or very averse because they think it has to be this black and white, like very like you're giving something up, you have to sacrifice something. But instead, if we flip the script and instead view it as like, no, you're gaining something by getting to explore incorporating more of these plant forward options, it's going to improve,
Mhm.
your health. It's going to help the environment. It's going to probably add flavor to your dish more than anything, because people care about taste the most out of everything, right? When it comes to food, then it's like it shifts the conversation. Then it's like, oh, we're actually, yeah, I love that idea. It's like you're flipping the script. You're making people reconsider their perception of a dish, which is really cool. I
Yeah.
really like that. And then, I think another piece of this is like talking about the concept of food security. With
Hmm.
growing climate change, there's going to need to be adaptation when it comes to, the ingredients that we all can use worldwide, the access we're going to have for food. And just the fact of the matter is, when it comes to agriculture and livestock, like all of those things are being threatened by the climate crisis. And so we as a human society can't even really depend that much in the long term on just like a very like strictly meat heavy or
Yeah.
animal protein diet, period, because of like the climate conditions. Like that's just the reality of it. And so it is going to be important that people learn
Yeah.
how to innovate with being plant forward in a way that's not sacrificing something, but is being mindful of incorporating more of those options, because we're all going to have to collectively adapt anyway. So you might as well figure out how to make things, spice it up and make it taste good, because resources are going to continue to be limited over time. So I love that. Like, I think being
Exactly.
plant forward is a matter of thinking about food
There was
security.
there was a
Like,
beautiful thing a friend of mine told me, and she was saying how in Liberia, she was from Liberia. She said they're not taught what to eat; they're taught what not to eat. Because all of a sudden, when you're taught what not to eat, it means everything else is edible. So it's really about how do we open up and look at all the options that are in front of us. Because I think, as you said, like we eat a very narrow, a very narrow band of what is edible on the planet. And once we start opening our eyes to all the things that we could be eating and should be eating, then all of a sudden you start seeing opportunities rather than limitations.
I really love that. And I mean, just to dive into, your own culinary journey a little bit, obviously you're an expert and a thought leader in this space. I'm just wondering, like, how did you make sure that with your training you were able to bring in your culture? How did you, like, ensure and bring that along the way? Because I know there's sometimes people say you go into a culinary institute and it's very focused on, like, Western foods and Western
Or
culture,
French
like, at
French
least from what
techniques,
I know
right?
from watching the Food Network, you know what I mean? Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, French techniques, like Anthony Bourdain and all of that. So I'm just wondering, how did you make sure that you, like,
I
kept onto
how did
those
I do that? I think
roots with all of that?
for myself, mine was I'm mostly self-taught. So what I did in my journey was I traveled a lot and I ate a lot and just really had amazing food experiences around the continent. And then I said, okay, I know this. I know it's
Wow.
delicious. It's amazing. And the rest of the world is over here. So how do I find a way to bridge that? And so I ended up doing like a 1 month crash course at Culinary Institute of America. And so for me, it was like I took 1 month and then I added it to however many decades of like experience that I had from my mouth and my mother and the aunties and grandmothers that I was meeting around the continent. So for me, it's I flipped it because I would say that I learned the rules that they were working with. I learned and understood their vocabulary and their language, but knowing how to express what they want. What I mean by that is I
Mm.
know the Ghanaian dishes that I fell in love with and that I'm still in love with, and the ones that I met along the way. How am I able to explain it to somebody who doesn't know anything about it, but in a language that they understand? So for me, that was my journey. I've never trained or worked with anyone. So like people are always like, well, you make chocolates. Who's your inspiration? Like, who did you use to inspire this collection? I'm like, myself and all the aunties that I met along the way. So there's nobody that is no,
Uh,
because like I think that we sometimes we put the risk like we I don't know. I think sometimes what we have, we don't appreciate it. So in Ghana, like people always laugh at me because I came back 8 years ago. So I can play sort of like I'm just like I've just come back and I don't really understand. And it's fine. And I don't mind looking silly, but I love going up to like old aunties and grandmothers in villages and like, what is this? How do you make it? Can you show me how to prepare this? Because
mm,
they actually have the knowledge about sustainability because they needed to know how to make something stretch. They knew how to make food for a family out
mm-hmm.
of very little. They understand how to cook with very little technique, but create things that were like phenomenally delicious. And so for me, they have the answer. I'm just the conduit. Like I'm just the middleman that's like taking this like generations of knowledge and translating on a plate that maybe somebody in New York might understand.
Mm,
So for me, for me, it's really about how do we
mm.
connect all this indigenous knowledge and understanding to modern day. So for me, I take what I need to from sort of the gastronomic world, but what I know is I can cook Ghanaian dishes and I know more about African flavors than anybody else that is in any of these culinary schools. So like bring it, let's go.
Oh my God, I love that so much. I love meeting people who are translators and storytellers. And that's why I was so excited to have you on the show today. I think you're someone who it's just very inspiring. You didn't want, you know, you're the definition of like, if they don't give me a seat at the table, I'm gonna build the table, you know, like you're that woman, you're doing that. And I love that so much. That's, you know, that's absolutely incredible. And you know, building off of that, as you know, we're wrapping up here, I just wanted to know, like, from your own advice. Actually, I have two questions. I'm gonna ask you two pieces of advice because you're just really
Okay.
dope, and I'm just like very happy to have you on here. So the first question is advice around if people want to embrace being more plant forward. What are some tips that you want to give them to embrace that more in their day-to-day life if they're not, you know, a trained culinary expert like yourself? But just want to implement it.
No, but I mean, like for myself, like I said, I did a 1 month crash course in a culinary school. Everything else has really been like learning and being inspired by women around me. I think for me, I would say if you just want to get into cooking, buy a new ingredient or buy a new spice or something every week or every month. You know, just try something new and play with it. You know, either look it up online and see how someone else has prepared it, but just I think we just need to all stretch a little bit and try something different. It could be a fruit you've never had before or a vegetable you've never had before. I mean, I only like 2 years ago started learning about Brussels sprouts because it's not something that I've ever really, you know, cooked, but I love Brussels sprouts now. And I figured out how to cook them in a way that I really love. So just, yeah, whenever you can, just grab something new that you haven't tried before. And I would say also read as many, like, well, eat at different restaurants and they don't have to be fancy, expensive ones. It's like, for me, it's just about deliciousness. So some of the mom and pop shops that have like just different ingredients than what you know, just go ahead and ask them for one thing and just try one dish.
Oh, I love that. And then the last question is just like, what is your advice for, you know, other women of color who, you know, I have a very similar journey to you in some ways where it's like, I didn't wait around for people to give me my expertise. I just built it myself. I like
Yeah.
self studied also. I learned how to do the thing. What is your advice for maybe some other people, not necessarily just women of color, but just people on that journey where maybe
Mhm.
they're very passionate about something, but they feel like they need X, Y, and Z pedigree to get there. Obviously, you were able to, you know, figure it out yourself. I'm someone who also had to like figure it out myself. What is your advice for those
Yeah.
people on that journey?
Yeah, in terms of for other people, I would say that my first one is to believe in yourself. I think that so much of the world is kind of questioning us and making us kind of feel like we have imposter syndrome. So I think it's really important to first just believe in who you are and then do the homework. It doesn't mean you have to get a degree, but actually understand the landscape where you are working. So for me, in my case, it was like I started practicing. I did the pop up with my friends in Senegal, understood it. And then at the end, did a bit of time at the culinary school 1 month, but you know, I didn't do this several years and I haven't worked in someone else's kitchen. And I haven't worked in someone else's kitchen, but I think what is important to me is, and for many of us, we're in spaces that have never been explored before. We're doing things that no one else has done. We see needs that no one else has met. So again, you know more about what you know than anybody else has because they have not lived your life experience. So I think it's just understanding the landscape and seeing how to fit yourself in and understand their language to be able to share what you uniquely know that nobody else does. And I think for me, one of the things that I love trying to do is share culture. And so I've been doing that by sharing flavors and spices and fruits from Africa through chocolate. And so I just wanted to share a discount code with everybody. The website, our company is called Midunu Chocolates. So it's us.midunu, chocolate with an s.com. And you can use the promo code BrownGirlGreen10 to get 10% off your first purchase. We have a collection right now, which is showcasing a lot of spices from West Africa. And I just think it's a great way to explore and learn more. We've also put in all the chocolates are named after women that have inspired me. And there's a bit of story about each flavor and where it's sourced from and some of the tasting notes. So I hope you enjoy it.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us on today's show. We loved having you. Thank you for your time and for joining. And yeah, Thank you, everyone, for listening to today's episode. Super appreciate it. And I hope you try out some plant forward dishes in the future. Thank you so much, Selassie, for joining. Really appreciate your time. And thank you so much.
You can follow me on Instagram. It's Atadika, Satadika, or you can follow at Midunu Chocolates. And that's where you'll get all the stuff that's going on with our chocolates and what we're sharing. So I hope to hear more from you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Selassie, for joining us today. Make sure you follow her and her journey, get those chocolates, and make sure that you are subscribed to the Brown Girl Green podcast. And we'll catch you on the next one. Thank you.